Shall we move on then to Full Metal Jacket?
Yes, let's do that. Like Casualties of War, which we will come to next, Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket is based on literary sources, in this case The Short Timers, a novel based on the real-life experiences of Gustav Hasford, effectively Matthew Modine's private Joker character, and co-writer Michael Herr's memoir Dispatches. A film of two parts, though actually it feels more like a film of two films. Full Metal Jacket's first portion takes place at the Paris Island boot camp, where a group of new Marine Corps recruits are drilled to combat readiness by R. Lee Ermey's gunnery Sergeant Hartman. This sadistic git puts the young men in his charge through physical and psychological hardship and humiliation to turn them into a viable fighting force. Apparently one of that group that believes break him down to build him back up again is the appropriate way to train soldiers, and who almost certainly has never ever considered trying an alternative. Reacting particularly poorly to these tender ministrations is Vincent D'Onofrio's Leonard Lawrence, nicknamed Gomer Pyle by the ever-delightful Hartman. While the film is commenting on the abuse these young men endured in a job many of them never requested, Private Pyle is too incompetent at pretty much every aspect of military life that credibility is strained beyond breaking point that it should ever have been there, ranking somewhere below Forrest Gump and, yeah, sure, I totally buy him as a soldier. This poor schlump has no business being anywhere near a firearm or military unit, though I honestly don't know if it's the film or the reality it's based on that is incredulous, though I fear the latter. Nevertheless, D'Onofrio gives a great and sympathetic turn as the driven to breaking point recruit with a tragic end. The second part of the film follows the boot camp's other main character, Matthew Modine's J.T. Joker Davis, assigned after basic training to Stars and Stripes, the in-house military newspaper. After surviving the Tet Offensive, Joker is attached to a squad during the Battle of Wei, and sees a number of its members killed by a sniper. After finding wounding the sniper, a teenage girl, Joker ends his 1,000-yard stare around the same time that the US media declares Vietnam an unwinnable war. I had never been particularly enamoured of Full Metal Jacket, remembering that I found it underwhelming and largely pointless. As such, I didn't feel any need to watch it again, and so hadn't done so for 2 decades. With my knowledge and experience of films vastly broadened in the interim, and my critical abilities more acute, I was, though, quite happy to return to this now. And having watched it again, it's underwhelming and largely pointless. Likewise, it's unnecessary voiceover, used 2 or maybe 3 times throughout, as we discussed. Technically it's a well-made film, I don't think that should come as a surprise in a Kubrick piece, but it continues to fail to engage me. I come to the same conclusion now as I did in the 1990s though, and that is that the essential pointlessness of the film is reflective of Kubrick's view that the Vietnam War was essentially pointless. This does not make for compelling or entertaining viewing, however. I'm sure my feelings about Full Metal Jacket also aren't helped by the perception and culture around it. Like the cult of Fight Club, I feel the more macho, harder of thinking fans have extracted entirely the wrong message from the film, more likely to lionise than criticise R. Lee Ermey's Sergeant Hartman or the Crazy Door Gunner, holding them up as heroes or at least some sort of admirable or aspirational character, rather than the despicable torturer or cold-blooded murderer they respectively are. It's almost comical too, quite how unlikable nearly every character is, and while the casual, and sometimes not so casual, racism and homophobia may be accurate, it's difficult to sit through, and I can only wonder how unpleasant it may be for people who have actually been on the receiving end of that. Full Metal Jacket is very much not unique in this regard, of course. The next film is in fact considerably worse. But at least Casualties of War makes pretense to consider Vietnamese as people. In Full Metal Jacket, all Vietnamese are sex workers, pimps or enemy soldiers. For all its fame and popularity, to me Full Metal Jacket remains an inessential Vietnam War film, and if you've not seen it, then know that you can carry on like that without feeling like you're missing out.
Interesting. I still quite like Full Metal Jacket. Spoke about this a couple of years back in the Stanley Kubrick one. In fact, I like it so much it's strange to think of it as not being one of my favourite Kubrick films just because Stanley Kubrick has quite the roster of decent films to go by. Definitely right in what you're saying. It's definitely 2 different films that are kind of very vaguely joined together. Perhaps it would have been better had it been split into those 2 films, because the first half it's as much a film about the American Army as it is about the Vietnam War. Certainly all of that first half of it, which I still find quite compelling. I didn't know about anyone who could put this the kind of Fight Club messaging type thing. I didn't think that was possible, but I'll presume you got that from somewhere.
It's definitely there, Scott. It's definitely there.
Well, just because the shouty funny man is funny,
I
so
think a
we
lot
should.
of it, it's like people have like really latched onto R. Lee Ermey, but like he's a terrible person.
Yes, I mean I think it's a really compelling character, and I thought it was a really entertaining section of the film watching that kind of breakdown there. But it's not a role model for crying out loud. Yeah, that's the point of it. Is you're supposed to recognise this as bad, surely? No?
Yeah, honestly, I think... and I will just say first that I get a lot more of the first half of the film than the second half. It's the second half that really strikes me as the pointless part.
Yes.
But the fact that R. Lee Ermey's character in this became such a kind of cult thing, I mean, that character didn't end up in Toy Story.
Yeah.
Because people thought he was a really terrible character. It's because people latched onto that as something they liked.
Yeah. People like shouting. YouTubers taught us this. Yes, no, that's a bit disappointing. But yes, the second half is the lesser of it. I get the feeling that once it actually gets to Vietnam, it doesn't quite know what to do. It has some interest for me, and it's one of the very few Vietnam films that doesn't restrict itself mostly to jungle warfare. I can't recall off the top of my head seeing too many other films that are more in the admittedly ruined but urban environments and that kind of thing.
London, weirdly.
Yes. So that's that does give it a slightly different flavour for some of it, but yes, it's in an hour and a bit of film that is leading up to one moral crisis point that could kind of almost be thought of as an afterthought by that point. It's a bit of a trudge around Vietnam without really much aim at the end, I suppose, is a fairly reasonable summation of it. So yes, I don't disagree with you all that much. I just get more out of it than you do by the looks of it. Clutch of decent performances again. I don't think Matthew Modine's ever been better.
I'm not sure I've ever seen anything else with Matthew Modine. I've particularly rated him at all apart from this. Yes,
and Vincent D'Onofrio. Always a committed actor, but sometimes committed in entirely the wrong directions. So yes, this maybe is certainly his most iconic, I think, performance, and clearly.
I'm not sure I'd say always committed. He has an escape plan where he's clearly there for the paycheck. He's definitely not committed in that film.
Should have been committed for taking the role. Yes, so I'm not going to argue with too much on it. I just think get a bit more from it than you do. But yes, I really enjoy it. Again, maybe enjoy is not quite the right term for given what's on display here, but I do get a lot of. I certainly find it more compelling than you do. Let's say that, and I find more to appreciate in it.
I think it might come down to the filmmaker, actually, Scott, because you began your response to my remarks with Stanley Kubrick having a lot of fine films to choose from, and nah, not so much. I think I like a Stanley Kubrick film. And it is a Stanley Kubrick film I love, but that's Doctor Strangelove. And pretty much everything else leaves me cold. Stanley Kubrick does nothing for me. I haven't seen Barry Lyndon, which I know Craig waxed particularly lyrical about when you did your Kubrick episode, which I wasn't a part of. Spartacus I've not seen in a long, long time. And The Killing I think I've seen, but now I'm not absolutely certain. But yeah, for the rest, A Clockwork Orange... 2001 I think is an appalling film. Well, appalling strong, but I think it's a really boring and not very good film. Eyes Wide Shut is just weird. The Shining's dull. Kubrick doesn't work for me for the most part. I can appreciate some of his technical craft, but in terms of the actual narrative and things, I think, nah.
Fair enough.
Just wonder whether maybe that's part of this, something about
it could be style, if you find them. I don't know if you find them a bit too clinical or maybe not as. That's an often a concern. Is he's seen as too clinical or not quite in touch with the humanity of his films, and that's maybe something that's coming to the fore and something that needs to be so concerned with the humanity as a war film. Then perhaps that's part of it.
Yeah. I don't know, but yes, it continues to not do an awful lot for me, this film, so I'll go back to, and to be honest, I will probably never watch this again for the rest of my life.
Yes.
I probably wouldn't have, but actually, at some point I probably would have gone through all of Kubrick's stuff again, but I've done this one now, so if I do that in the future I can just skip over this.
Yeah.